got a good group. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Super excited to be doing an event. I know it doesn't look exactly the same as how we're used to doing author events, so thanks for bearing with us and trying something new. We're St. Pete's Indie Bookstore, opened in December 2019 in this space right behind me. We were in pop-up mode for a couple years before that, and we've been through a lot in our first 9 months of being open, but it's been really amazing to see the community rally around us as we've been in, quite a few hurdles. But we're going strong with curbside pickup. We're open 6 days a week for in-store shopping and by appointment, and we're still shipping nationally for folks who aren't able to come by the store. So I'm also going to drop a link to the great book that we're discussing tonight in the chat for those who haven't had the chance to pick it up yet. And I want to introduce our moderator for tonight. Thomas Hallock has published widely on early Florida and nature writing. He's a professor of English at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. His most recent book, A Road Course in Early American Literature, Travel and Teaching from Aztlan to Amherst, is due out February with the University of Alabama Press. So really excited to have you here, Tom. And I'll turn it over to you to get going. And the chat box is open for anyone who has questions along the way.
Yes, it's my privilege to introduce. I have been assigned The Single Bird, a daughter's memoir by Susan Cerulean, who is here. Thank you very much for joining us online, Susan.
So happy to.
A little bit about Susan. I'm going to put it very straightforward. Susan's name is almost synonymous with nature writing in Florida over the past 20 or 30 years. We probably know, many people know her work from The Wild Heart of Florida and a co-edited edition that you did with Jeff Riffle, I believe, right?
That's right.
Yep. Also, the Book of the Everglades, edited the Book of the Everglades with Milkweed, correct? I know this is heresy, but I would say it would be the first book that I would read on the Everglades. So I won't say that in public, but really, really fine study that's held up really well. She lives in Tallahassee and has really devoted herself to the Red Hills region of the state and the Panhandle. She is the author of Tracking Desire, which is about swallow-tailed kites. Again, lots of glades in there. Co-edited with Janice Ray and James Wolpart, Unspoiled, Writers Speak for Florida Coast, which was about the Gulf Horizon, Deepwater Horizon spill. I'll issue a reminder that the moratorium on Florida drilling ends in 2022. So if you're on the fence about who to vote for in the coming election, we may think about drilling maybe back on the table in Florida. It's something for us to think about. The author of Coming to Pass, Florida's Coastal Islands in a Gulf Change. And most recently, I have been assigned The Single Bird, which is an absolutely heartbreaking memoir about really trying to look the Gulf and look at landscapes you love in an era of climate change, but also really kind of come to grips with the grieving first of not only a son going off to college, but also a parent being.
Uh-oh.
Hey, Tom, I think we lost you for a second. So when you're unfrozen, we'll go back to where you were.
Claire, it might help if more people turned off their videos.
That is a great point. If anyone's able to turn off their video, that might help us with our connection. Thanks, everybody.
Even though it's great to see everyone's faces.
All right, I think we lost him. We'll give him a minute to come back.
Okay. There he is. There he is. Unmute yourself. There you go. Oh.
How much did I drop off? Or, I'm sorry, my neck through?
You're a little glitchy. Let's
Oh no.
wait. Okay, now you sound normal.
All right. Did you catch my whole introduction?
I think
Pretty close.
yeah, I think it was pretty close, but maybe go back a couple sentences and we'll jump in from there.
Yeah, Susan's a really good writer, and she cares a lot about nature, and she wrote Coming to Pass, Florida's Coastal Islands of Change, and this compelling memoir, I've Been Assigned, The Single Bird, about her son going off to college, her father passing away from causes complicated by dementia, complications of dementia, and really trying to think about the natural world in a straightforward way, trying to look at your grief and confront your grief. So please welcome Susan Cerulean.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that, Susan. Yeah.
That's okay. No worries. No worries. I'm happy to be speaking to you all from Tallahassee, and I'm imagining that another time we could be down there in Tombolo, talking in person. But this way we get to have people. I see people from North Carolina and Apalachicola, and I don't even know where everybody's from, but there's an upside to Zoom, and that is that we can reach a wider audience. And isn't it fun? We talked about this for a minute before everybody came on, that we're together right now tonight on this particular night. I'm going to think about us, all of us, as the warm-up crowd for the third night of the Democratic National Convention, which looked a lot like this last night. And our job is to add to the collage of faces that I saw last night, the diversity of faces. And also we're going to be speaking for the landscapes that we love and for the wild creatures that are so rarely do we hear their voices in a way that we can hear. When I was putting together my virtual book tour this summer, I was so happy to learn about Tombolo Books in downtown St. Petersburg, where I went to college between 1970 and 1974. And it was really especially fun to learn about the name Tombolo, because the owners, Alsace and Candace, must love the coast as much as I do. And I think most Floridians do, because a tombolo, in case you didn't know, I looked it up. A tombolo is a narrow bar of sand that connects an island to a mainland, and it can be a really small island, or it can be, something larger. And so try to picture that in your mind, because a tombolo is just the kind of place I'd like to be able to be with you right now. And I want to take you virtually to a tombolo in my part of the world here on the Gulf Coast of Northwest Florida, because it just so happens that tombolos are also beloved by the wild birds that I've written about in this book and others. So we're out there, it's getting close to sunset. It's really beautiful and there's a breeze, and we're looking for a group of shorebirds resting on the spit and the tombolo. And when we find some, we'll stop at a distance that they can tolerate, and we'll sit on the beach. And if you've got binoculars, you'll have your binoculars, and we'll watch what the birds are doing, how they're going about their lives. Because if you haven't done that, it's just a fascinating thing to do and to understand and figure out, if you live in Florida especially. So in the particular flock that we're looking at, there are dozens of the big, large terns You know, terns are the ones that dive straight down for fish. And they're mixed in with an equal number of black skimmers, which are the ones with the bill that skim along the surface of the water. And the sand that they're sitting on is just, you can see that it's just compacted by hundreds of bird toes. And we're taking in that kind of detail because we've slowed down and we're paying attention. Off to the left, there's a group of royal terns, which have a beautiful royal red-orange bill, and they're tending to their plumage. And then we see some pairs of laughing gulls that even this late in the season are mating, and we're watching that wind lift their feathers. There are sanderlings and a few black-bellied plovers which have just come back from their nesting up in the Arctic and Greenland, and they're stepping in between the others. It's just such a, like I mentioned, a diverse crowd. Then we find what we're looking for, which is a single roving, tiny, tiny little snowy plover chick. And it has long, spindled legs, and it's investigating the beach all alone, and its voice is trilling like a little audible stream of bubbles. And she resembles to me a little marshmallow Easter chick, except she's all covered. She doesn't have feathers yet. She's, or a tail. She's covered with gray and buff down. And we watch her stop to scratch her chin with a little black foot. And we wonder if that tiny chick is scared when the black skimmers fly up and circle and they start honking. And then we start to wonder when and what and how does a chick, like a baby, like a human baby, learn to fear? It probably doesn't know, as we know, that it has hatched a highly endangered species into a highly endangered world. But its parent knows all about threat. And it flies back from the water's edge where it's picking up little flies to feed the chick. And it drives away another bird that seems threatening and has ventured a little too close to the chick. And the chick is taking refuge under a little green dune plant. And then when the adult returns, the chick and burrows into the feathers of its breast. What I wanted to do with this book was to use the story of, as Tom mentioned, so graciously. I have been studying and writing about nature in Florida mostly all my adult life, and it just hasn't always felt like we were making a lot of progress in protecting those things. So I thought that maybe more people could identify with what the birds are facing and what the climate's facing if we could parallel the stories in this memoir between caregiving an elder and also trying to care for wildlife. And I know that people on this visiting with us today on at this talk have dealt with the hard issue of taking care of someone with dementia. So you'll have to let me know if these parallels work or not. One of the things that I really loved about watching that newly hatched plover chick was how it came into the world, and I've seen this in my own grandchild. It just seemed possessed of a bold life force. And that's what you see when you're looking at wild creatures, that they're just full of the purpose of their living, and that is all they do. They don't get distracted, and I want to do that as well. I want to get up every morning and live my purpose also, and I bet you share that feeling. So I'm going to talk about that next. It's a difficult time to be a naturalist on the planet, because if you watch wild bird populations or if you pay attention to manatees or Florida panthers or whatever you love in our state or your state if you live somewhere else, that you know that their numbers are dropping, and that the climate is changing as well. And you have to be aware that we're living in a period of great of extinction. And as far as birds go, we've lost nearly 3 billion individual wild birds since 1970. And shorebirds, just to talk about them, like our little snowy plover and the gang it was hanging out with, they require beaches to nest. They don't make nests in trees or birdhouses or anywhere else. Some of them do nest on rooftops. A few species have managed that. But they need some quiet beach to lay their eggs and raise their young. But you know, if you live, especially in the St. Pete area, about, there's issues with recreational crowding as well as sea level rise. And so the birds are declining there because of those things. So back to my father, each one of us has a story about how we end up taking on the sort of sacred burden of caring for our elders. And as a writer, sitting with my dad during the last years of his life was a lot like sitting with the wild birds that we were just visiting, because to understand his needs, I had to be really still and observant, kind of like a meditation practice, because people with dementia can't speak usually for themselves and tell us what they need. So I did a lot of that, and I also looked out the window, and that was where I really came up with the concept of how these two stories might work together, because outside his window was a little forest, a small forest, and in the beginning there was a kudzu vine. You know, all you Southern people know what kudzu is. It's that rampant green vine that takes over huge spaces. And as I watched that, and I watched it kind of smother those trees, and I watched my dad lose some of his faculties to the what we know are similar tangles and plaques of dementia, I got the idea that humans are doing the same thing to the earth as that disease was doing to his brain. The earth is the brain and the body into which we were born. So in some nearly parallel way, we face not only a crisis in numbers of people diagnosed with dementia, but as a culture, we are stricken with this disease. For why else would we knowingly destroy the planet that sustains our lives? But the dementia that affects our culture is different from the individual person. It's based on the belief that we can take and consume whatever we like, just like the kudzu does from the trees. And this is different. It's such a tragedy to me that we have forgotten, or that we fail to honor, our inseparability and our independence with all of nature. And I think that too many of us, probably not one person that's on this call today, think about the earth as just the environment around us. And we experience ourselves as separate from the earth, the birds. And we may see water, clean air, resources of minerals and other things as only in terms of what they can offer to us. But that's the thing. If we can realize that we really do depend on those natural aspects of the earth completely, then I think we might be able to change the path that we're on. My father was dearly beloved by his family, like your parents. But after all, he was a single being, and he had a certain faith that we all will ultimately share. And I came to realize pretty quickly, once it was my turn to care for him, that I couldn't save him from that. But the Earth's biodiversity, those we can and must protect. We live in a time when the rights of humans and corporations are allowed to supersede the rights of nature. And that is what must change. And in some places it is changing. In Ecuador, there's a constitutional statement of the rights of the forests and all of nature there. Other countries have that as well. And it's a matter of a change in our cosmology, in how we view the world. And I think a lot of the Pulitzer Prize winning novelist Richard Powers, I bet most of you have read The Overstory, just a magnificent novel. And he says, we are living at a time when claims are being made for a moral authority that lies beyond the human. And that's the key, you guys. If we can make that shift, we can redeem ourselves. Because the derangement of our times, again, is rooted in how we live. That's the difference between the illness of dementia and the illness of our culture. The cultural dementia has allowed for the desecration of so much in the last years. The Bears Ears National Monument, the National Environmental Policy Act, the Migratory Bird Treaty and Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, grizzly bears and right whales and wolves, the springs of the rivers of Florida, and just this week, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. But we can mitigate those things. We are living at such an important time in history. There is no question that we are called into service. And what form that service and our engagement takes will be diverse, just like you saw on television if you watched last night. That's how nature operates too. But together we have this enormous power to stand up, to vote, to speak and act on behalf of all that is sacred. And so that's what I'm hoping we'll do. And I thank you so much for being here tonight and for being interested in this book and the protection of our place on the planet. And I would love to talk with you. And Tom shares my same experiences, and he's here as a resource too. Any questions that you have, any experiences that you'd like to share, that's where we're at. That's what we're going to do at this point in the program. So thank you so much for listening to me.
So please use the chat feature to the right if you'd like to kind of compose your thoughts, or I believe you can raise your hand, correct? And if you have any questions for Susan.
You're going to have to help me, Tom, because I'm not seeing the chat.
Okay, I will repeat the questions as they come up. I guess I'll start with the question you already answered in your talk. Some of the questions that I had, and the obvious: what led you to make the connection between your father and the earth? You seem to answer very large law. One of the things that I really have come to grips with, or that I've really struggled with, is the tremendous amount of resources that we do use at the end of our lives. And that only added to the pain, the way our own bodies almost become a commodity. Our bodies become a product, a billable. And we have a whole industry that has gotten exceptionally good at keeping us as human beings alive at tremendous environmental cost. And I was wondering if you struggled with that in the process of writing.
You mean in watching all that going on?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was always in the back of my mind, when I would see the plastics being thrown
yeah,
away, the resources being used,
yeah. I
and
think
how you
I
reconcile that.
yeah, it's really hard, and it's very similar to what's going on with the COVID virus right now too. The disposable products that we have to use to protect ourselves, um, and we don't even have enough of everything that we need. There are so many of us, and medicine is very good in the elder care area at like you say, keeping people alive a long time. I don't think when I think about my own grandparents and people their age, people did not live as long with a chronic illness like this as they do nowadays. And I think it takes the resources of the all the disposable things that you mentioned, but it also takes the resources of the caregivers. In my case, we couldn't keep our dad at home because he wasn't able to. He had a variant that of the illness that didn't allow him to be able to hardly move, but his brain was in pretty good shape. And so we had to hire a lot of caregivers to fill in and help. So yeah, I saw that every day, and the financial resources that it takes to make sure someone is safe. And
And
these days with this illness, the most numbers of deaths have been in the assisted living facilities. So it's a much different situation than it was even 6 months ago.
Mhm. Other questions that people have, please raise your hand for a question. Oh, did your last name serve as a pilot towards your environmental concerns? That is from Julie Roberts. Thank you very much for your question. Again, did your last name serve as pilot towards your environmental concerns?
Well, I chose that name when I was in my early 30s. I was in a wild place. I was in Glacier National Park for a whole summer. And I did intentionally pick that, Julie, because I wanted to remind myself of who I was working for. And so I went through the back of the bird book, and I tried Susan Wren, Susan Kingfisher, Susan, different names, and ended up with Cerulean, I thought was a beautiful word. And I happened to be staying at a lake called Cerulean Lake, camping. It was just a time in my life when I had a lot of flexibility, and changing my name was part of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for the backdrop. I don't know if you can see it, Susan.
No, I can't.
Um, from Beth Appleton. Okay. Thank you, Beth, for your question. You touch on that. Your title was intuitive. I really find that idea fascinating and think others do too. Would you tell us more about your creative process and how this title came about?
Okay, sure. I keep what's called, when I'm writing and working on a project, I keep what one of my teachers called a commonplace book, which is a journal that's special to you say, okay, I'm going to be working on watching shorebirds for a long while. And so I'm going to decorate the cover with birds, and I'm going to put questions to myself that arise in there, and I'm going to free write in response. And so I have several, for every book that I write, I have a commonplace book, which is just a sort of expansive journal, which might include pictures. And Beth Appleton is a really amazing artist in Apalachicola, Florida. So you should look her up as well, because I'd like to compare processes with her. But one time, free writing is my best access to the non-rational side of my brain. And I was just sort of working along with whatever was coming to me. And I thought, I'm working on something about a single bird. I've been assigned a single bird. What does that mean? And I didn't even really know at the time. I wasn't looking for a book title. I wasn't that far along, but I realized that my dad was like a single bird. He was one guy and I was responsible for him, as I had been, for my child when he was young. And sometimes when you're working out there in the world, you think, I can't really save anything unless I was a doctor and someone came in with a heart attack and I was able to intervene, unless I was working for the Nature Conservancy and I saved a preserve somewhere. People do save things, but that hasn't been something that I've done a lot of. But I can show up for an assignment, and that's how that verb came in there. It wasn't like a choice. It was an assignment that was given to me because of what I'm interested in and what I love. And so there were these various kinds of single birds, human and non-human, that were mine to report to the world about and to do my best for.
And Brooke reminds us that commonplaces books were common during the Renaissance and even before.
I did not know they went that far.
In my next book, I don't know if you can see it, but here is my next book, Road Course in Early American Literature, starts with a common.
I didn't know that, but I recommend the process, don't you, Tom?
Pages, and people try to take out as I'm recommending place. It was common during your self-education. Did I get dropped?
Just repeat that last little bit.
Yeah, I get too animated. I have to remind myself to get, I get excited. In the 18th and early 19th century, women kept commonplace books and exchanged them among themselves. So there was a whole secret language exchanged through couplets and verses and quotes, a kind of way of passing the notes. So we love that you have the commonplace book, and it's such a vital form. Nancy Shivers has her hand raised. Nancy, are you there?
There she is.
Yes, so Susan, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that I am not familiar with your work, and I feel like I should be. This book resonated with me in so many ways, and I just really, really loved it. I really did. So, but I'm curious to know what your background, what brought you to the work, the nature work. Like, is this something you studied in school? How did you arrive at this place?
I got a bachelor's degree in biology from Eckerd College in St. Petersburg. But there wasn't a lot of, outdoor aspect to it. It was more genetics and cell biology and that kind of thing at that time. And so it really didn't happen there. But then I worked in a field station in South Carolina in my 20s. And I just happened to hang out with a lot of people who loved birds, who loved to be outside, who loved to adventure. And so I adopted that for my own preferred way of spending all my free time. And then I got a master's degree at the University of Florida. But really, most of the writing part I learned from the books that I love and from the people who write the books I love. So Terry Tempest Williams was my first teacher.
Oh, I was going to bring her up because I saw you mention her in the book, and she's one of my favorites too.
Oh,
so,
yeah. I went to a extended writing workshop with her, and that pretty much set my course. Maybe probably 30 years ago, and she's still the very best spokeswoman we have. Yeah. And Linda Hogan, the poet, and a number of writers here in Tallahassee. But in that commonplace book that we were talking about, John Hay is a nature writer that I love. He's from Cape Cod, and if you like birds, you
Yes.
should definitely look him up. And so I would take a phrase, or Robert McFarlane would be now, or Helen MacDonald. Take a phrase that really just jumps out at you. I still do this all the time, and then I will free write from that, and it's like that person gets into my brain, and like you were talking about, Tom, with the way women would share their books. Well, I wasn't sharing with the people that were informing me, but we were still having a conversation, and I think that's a really a way that all of us can write.
Now,
Thank you.
Susan, you may have touched on this already, but Mike McManus has a question, and that is, how does science, especially ecology, influence your writing community and your background in there?
Wait a minute, I didn't catch that all the way.
How has science, and particularly ecology, shaped your writing? And you may even talk very specifically about your ties to the scientific community in Florida.
Well, like the fact that I'm married to one. My husband is an oceanographer.
I don't think people knew that.
Yeah, and so over the last 25 years, we've spent a lot of time outside, and he's the science, I'm the creative, and we'll just talk. I'll say, why is the beach retreating in this way here? And then he can, and then I can put that into language that people can understand, because I think the language of science is absolutely critical to our times, and it's hard to believe it's even being attacked. But sometimes it's not clear to people. The science of climate change, for example, or the science of why birds regurgitate on the beach, or there's just so many cool things that are known by ecologists, biologists, scientists of all stripes. And yeah, it's I don't think that I could do the writing I do if I didn't have training in science, and if I didn't immerse myself in the scientific study as part of the, let's say, commonplace book that I'm putting together. It has to be, I'm not just writing about a beautiful thing that I'm seeing. I also want to understand what it is and how it fits into the big picture, which is what ecology does.
So several people have been asking, shifting a little bit, what's your next project? You have a next book lined up.
I have two.
Want to take a nap?
And I can't wait to be able to write again, because as everybody knows, the process of editing and just the whole process of the business end of writing takes a year or two after you've, or at least after you've finished the work. So I've been keeping notebooks on some subjects that I'm interested in. But I'll tell you what I'm really interested in right now. I want to be a poll worker, and I don't care. I'm going to take good care of myself. But Jeff and